Have you ever had that coworker who seems to be constantly waiting for you to fail? The one who smiles to your face but works behind the scenes to bring you down? Well, today I'm going to tell you the story of how my coworker tried to humiliate me in front of the company's board of directors, and how his own emails became the perfect weapon for my vindication. Buckle up, because this story has twists that even I couldn't have predicted. And before we start, if you enjoy workplace justice stories, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. You won't want to miss what happened after this. My name doesn't matter, but let's call me Alex. And this happened about 6 months ago. Now, I need to give you some background here, because without understanding the full context, you won't appreciate just how calculated and vindictive this person really was. This wasn't just a case of office rivalry gone wrong. This was a systematic, planned attempt to destroy someone's career. And that someone was me. I work at a mid-sized tech company where I've been for 5 years. And let me be clear, I earned my place there. I started as a junior analyst, fresh out of college, knowing absolutely nothing about the corporate world. I made mistakes, I learned, I grew. Through countless late nights, weekend work sessions, and projects that pushed me to my absolute limits, I climbed the ladder. Junior analyst to senior analyst in 18 months. Senior analyst to team lead in another year. And then, after proving myself on 3 major projects that all came in under budget and ahead of schedule, I was promoted to project manager. Nothing was handed to me. Every promotion was earned with blood, sweat, and actual results. My performance reviews were consistently excellent. My team respected me. My superiors trusted me. I had built a solid reputation over 5 years of hard work. And then Marcus arrived. 2 years ago, the company hired him as a manager for the department adjacent to mine. We were technically on the same level in the organizational chart, but our departments often collaborated on cross-functional projects. Marcus came from one of our main competitors, a much larger company, and his resume was impressive. 10 years of experience, 3 successful product launches, an MBA from a top-tier school. On paper, he was exactly what the company needed to scale up operations. But there was something about Marcus from day one that set off alarm bells in my head. It was subtle at first. The way he sized people up in meetings. The calculating look in his eyes when someone else received praise. The slight smirk when someone made a mistake. He had this confidence that went beyond healthy self-assurance. It was the kind of confidence that comes from someone who sees every interaction as a transaction, every relationship as leverage, and every colleague as either a stepping stone or an obstacle. In his first week, I tried to be welcoming. I took him out for coffee, explained the ins and outs of the company culture, warned him about which executives were particular about what, introduced him to key players across different departments. I thought I was being a good colleague. What I was actually doing was giving him a roadmap of exactly how to navigate the corporate structure, and he would use that information against me. The first few months were fine. We worked on a small collaborative project together, and everything seemed professional. But I started noticing small things. In meetings, he would subtly reframe my ideas as extensions of his own thoughts. When I'd send an email with a suggestion, he'd reply all with "Great point, Alex," and building on that, before taking the conversation in a completely different direction. These were minor irritations, the kind of thing that happens in any office. I brushed them off. I had bigger things to focus on. But Marcus was playing a longer game than I realized. He wasn't just stealing credit here and there. He was carefully, methodically building a narrative. A narrative where I was competent but limited. Useful but not exceptional. A solid B player in a world that needed A players. And I was completely oblivious to it. About 8 months into Marcus's tenure at the company, things started to shift. What had been subtle credit stealing evolved into something more insidious. It started with questions. Innocent questions, or at least that's how they were framed. We'd be in a meeting with senior leadership, and I'd be presenting an update on my project. Everything would be going smoothly, and then Marcus would raise his hand. "Sorry to interrupt, Alex, but can you clarify the rationale behind choosing this particular approach? I'm just wondering if we've considered the industry standard methodology that most companies use for this type of implementation." The question seems reasonable, right? He's just asking for clarification. Except he'd ask it in a way that implied I hadn't done my homework. that I'd overlooked something obvious, that maybe I didn't actually know what I was doing. And he'd do this consistently. Not every meeting, that would be too obvious, but enough that people started associating my presentations with Marcus's helpful questions. Then came the emails. Oh, the emails. Marcus discovered that email was the perfect weapon because it created a permanent record that made him look thoughtful and concerned while making me look careless or incompetent. He'd send messages like, "Hi, Alex. Just wanted to follow up on our conversation earlier. I know you mentioned you were handling the vendor negotiations, but I'm a bit concerned about the timeline. Are you sure you have a bandwidth for this? Happy to take it off your plate if you're overwhelmed." To anyone reading that email, Marcus looks like a helpful colleague offering support. But read between the lines. He's suggesting I'm overwhelmed. He's questioning whether I can handle my responsibilities. And he's positioning himself as the solution. And here's the really clever part. He'd always CC relevant people. Our shared director, the VP of operations, sometimes even the CEO on emails that definitely didn't need to go that high up the chain. So now you have executives seeing a pattern of emails where Marcus is raising concerns and offering help because apparently I need it. I started noticing that in meetings, people were looking at me differently. There was this slight hesitation before they'd agree with my suggestions. This need for additional confirmation that hadn't been there before. Marcus was poisoning the well one drop at a time, but I still didn't fully grasp the scope of what he was doing. I thought he was just an ambitious guy trying to make himself look good. Annoying, sure, but not dangerous. I should have been documenting everything from the start, but I didn't. Not yet. The real escalation began about 4 months ago when the big project was announced. The company was planning a complete overhaul of our core systems, a massive undertaking that would touch every department and could save the company millions annually in operational costs. This was the kind of project that could make or break careers. Let it successfully, and you're on the fast track to senior leadership. Screw it up, and you're probably looking for a new job. The executive team needed someone to lead it, someone with technical knowledge, project management experience, and the trust of multiple departments. They chose me. When the announcement came in the all-company meeting, I saw Marcus's face. For just a fraction of a second, the mask slipped. There was pure rage in his eyes. And then it was gone, replaced by that professional smile. He was one of the first people to congratulate me publicly, shook my hand, said all the right things about how the company had made an excellent choice, how he looked forward to supporting the project however he could. But I knew. In that moment, I finally understood. This wasn't about minor credit stealing or office politics. Marcus had been positioning himself for that role. He thought he'd done enough to undermine my credibility that when the big opportunity came, they'd overlook me and choose him. And I had gotten it instead. That's when the real sabotage began. Marcus offered to have his department support the project. It made sense. We'd need cross-functional collaboration, and his team had relevant expertise. I said yes, thinking that maybe this would be a chance to reset our relationship, work together on something important. I was an idiot. The sabotage was sophisticated. Nothing overt, nothing you could easily call out. Meetings would get rescheduled at the last minute due to emergencies on his end. Resources he'd promised would suddenly be unavailable, not refused, just temporarily allocated elsewhere. Critical information I needed would arrive just a bit too late to be useful. And every single time, he had a perfect excuse, a perfectly reasonable explanation. And he'd apologize so sincerely. "I'm so sorry, Alex. I know you needed those reports by Tuesday, but we had an urgent client issue come up. I've reprioritized, and you'll have them first thing tomorrow morning." What could I say? Emergencies happen. Priorities shift. That's business. Except it kept happening. And only on things related to my project. I started documenting every missed deadline, every rescheduled meeting, every delayed deliverable. I didn't know what I'd do with the documentation, but some instinct told me I'd need it. And then, 2 weeks before the board presentation, Marcus made his move. It was a Wednesday afternoon. I was putting the finishing touches on my board presentation, the one that would determine whether this massive project got full approval and funding. I've been working on it for weeks. Every slide was carefully crafted, every data point verified, every recommendation backed by solid analysis. My email pinged. Message from Marcus, subject line. Happy to help review your board presentation. I opened it. The message was friendly, collegial even. Hey Alex, I know you've got the big board presentation coming up. I've been through dozens of these in my previous company, and I know how critical they are. I'd be happy to take a look at your deck and give you some feedback. Fresh eyes can always catch things you might have missed. Just want to make sure you knock it out of the park. Let me know if you want me to review it. I stared at that email for a long time. Every instinct I had was screaming at me not to send it. But I was also exhausted, stressed, and second-guessing myself. And a small part of me thought, maybe this is an olive branch. Maybe Marcus genuinely wants to help. So I sent him the presentation. He got back to me within 24 hours. The response was extensive. A 4-page document of suggestions and feedback. According to Marcus, my presentation was fundamentally flawed. The structure was confusing and disorganized. The data visualization wasn't compelling enough for board-level consumption. My recommendations section needed to be completely restructured for clarity. He provided specific suggestions for almost every slide. Reorder this section. Remove this data. Add more context here. Change this chart type. Reframe this recommendation. It was overwhelming, and it planted seeds of doubt that grew into full-blown panic. What if he was right? What if my presentation really was a mess and I was too close to it to see the problems? This was the most important presentation of my career. Could I really risk going in front of the board with something that a more experienced colleague said was fundamentally flawed? I spent that entire weekend redoing the presentation, implementing every single one of Marcus's suggestions, restructuring sections, removing data I thought was critical, adding context that made things more complicated, changing the entire flow of the narrative. By Sunday night, I had a completely different presentation. It felt wrong. It didn't flow the way my original did. But Marcus had said these changes were necessary, and he had more experience with board presentations than I did. On Monday morning, I sent the revised version to Marcus for a final check. Thanks for all your help. I've implemented your suggestions. Let me know if you think it's ready. He responded within an hour. Looks much better, Alex. Good luck on Friday. I felt relieved, validated, ready. I was a lamb being led to slaughter. Tuesday morning, my email exploded. 37 new messages before 9 a.m. I opened my inbox with growing dread. There, at the top, was an email from Marcus. Sent Monday evening at 11:43 p.m. to the CEO, the entire board of directors, all C-level executives, and about a dozen other senior leaders. The subject line, urgent, serious concerns regarding Project Phoenix. My heart stopped. I opened it with shaking hands. Dear leadership team, it is with great concern that I'm reaching out regarding the Project Phoenix implementation scheduled for board review this Friday. While I have tremendous respect for Alex and their dedication to this project, I feel obligated to raise several serious concerns about the current project direction. Over the past several weeks, I have made multiple attempts to provide guidance and feedback to Alex regarding industry best practices for implementations of this scale. Unfortunately, many of these suggestions have been either ignored or inadequately addressed. Specifically, I am concerned about risk management protocols that fall below industry standards, timeline projections that appear unrealistic given the project's scope, vendor selection processes that may not have followed proper due diligence, budget allocations that seem to overlook critical infrastructure requirements. I have tried to raise these issues through appropriate channels, but I'm concerned that we may be heading toward a board presentation that will not adequately represent the risks and challenges of this initiative. I believe Alex has strong potential, but this project may be beyond their current level of experience. I would strongly recommend either postponing Friday's presentation until these concerns can be properly addressed, or considering whether different project leadership might be appropriate at this stage. I understand this is a difficult message to send, but I believe my responsibility to the company's success outweighs personal discomfort. Best regards, Marcus. I read it 3 times. Each time, I felt physically sick. He had just told the entire executive leadership team that I was incompetent, that I ignored feedback, that I wasn't experienced enough to lead this project. And he'd done it 2 days before the most important presentation of my life. My first instinct was panic. My second was rage. My third was to start typing a defensive response, explaining why everything he said was wrong. But something stopped me. Maybe it was intuition. Maybe it was the memory of every small act of sabotage over the past months finally clicking into place. I closed my email. I opened my documentation folder, the one where I'd been saving every interaction with Marcus for the past 4 months. And I started reading, really reading, looking for patterns. Within an hour, I saw it. The whole picture. Every email, every delayed deliverable, every helpful suggestion. It was all part of a plan. A plan that culminated in that email to the board. Marcus hadn't been trying to help me with my presentation. He'd been trying to sabotage it. All those suggestions he'd given me, they were designed to make my presentation worse, to make me look unprepared and confused. And then he'd sent that email, positioning himself as the concerned colleague who tried to help but been ignored. It was brilliant, diabolical but brilliant. But Marcus had made one critical mistake. He'd put everything in writing. Every step of his plan was documented in emails, messages, and written communications. I had evidence. Lots of it. I opened a new document and started building something. Not a defense. Not an explanation. A case. A complete, irrefutable case showing exactly what Marcus had done. I worked through Tuesday night, all day Wednesday, most of Thursday. By Thursday evening, I had 15 slides of pure, documented evidence. Emails showing Marcus deliberately delaying critical project components. Messages where he instructed his team not to collaborate with me. The suggestions he'd given me that directly contradicted industry best practices. And the crown jewel, an email he'd sent to another manager 2 months earlier that I'd been accidentally copied on. In that email, Marcus had written, "The Phoenix project is perfect. If I can make Alex look incompetent on this, that VP position opening next quarter is mine. Just need to be patient and let them dig their own grave." He'd literally written down his plan to sabotage me for a promotion. I also did something else. I rebuilt my original presentation, the one I'd created before Marcus's helpful feedback, because that presentation was good. It was excellent, actually. Friday morning arrived. The board meeting was at 10 a.m. I didn't sleep Thursday night, but I was calm, eerily calm, because I knew exactly what I was going to do. The boardroom at our company is on the top floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. A massive mahogany table that seats 20 people. It's designed to be intimidating, and it works. When I walked in at 9:50 a.m., the room was already full. All 7 board members. Our CEO and CFO. 3 VPs, various senior directors. And Marcus, sitting there with a leather portfolio, looking confident and concerned in equal measure. People were talking in hushed tones. I could feel the tension in the air. Marcus's email had clearly caused quite a stir. I set up my laptop, connected to the projector, and took my seat. My hands were steady. My mind was clear. At exactly 10 a.m., our CEO, Robert, called the meeting to order. "Thank you all for being here," he began. "We're here to review Project Phoenix and determine approval for full implementation and budget allocation. However, before we begin, I think we need to address the concerns raised by Marcus in his email earlier this week. These are serious allegations, and we need to discuss them." He turned to me. "Alex, I want to give you a chance to respond to what Marcus has outlined before we move to your presentation. But first, Marcus, would you like to provide context for your concerns?" Marcus nodded gravely and stood up. He looked around the room, making eye contact with each board member. A lawyer making his case to the jury. "Thank you, Robert. And let me start by saying this is incredibly difficult for me. Alex and I have worked together for 2 years, and I genuinely like and respect them, which is why this has been such a challenging situation." Oh, he was good. The reluctant whistleblower, forced by conscience to speak up. Over the past few months, as Project Phoenix has developed, I've become increasingly concerned about several aspects of the implementation plan. These aren't small issues. They're fundamental problems that could put the entire project at risk. He pulled out a document, clearly prepared in advance. Let me be specific. First, the risk assessment. Industry standard for a project of this scale requires a comprehensive risk matrix covering technical, operational, financial, and organizational risks. Alex's plan covers some technical risks, but completely overlooks the operational complexity of implementing across 7 departments simultaneously. He paused, letting that sink in. Second, the timeline. Alex has proposed a 12-month implementation schedule. Based on my experience with similar projects in my previous company, that timeline is unrealistic by at least 40%. We're setting ourselves up for costly delays and scope creep. Another pause. I could see board members taking notes. Third, vendor selection. The primary vendor Alex has chosen is certainly capable, but their pricing is 30% higher than competitors, and I haven't seen documentation of a proper competitive bidding process. That concerns me from both a cost and a compliance perspective. He continued for another 10 minutes, point after point, each one sounding reasonable, responsible, and deeply concerning. He talked about my resistance to feedback. He mentioned conversations where I'd supposedly dismissed his input. He painted a picture of a project manager who was in over their head, but too proud to admit it. It was a masterful performance. I watched board members' expressions shifting from neutral to concerned to alarmed. When Marcus finally sat down, the room was heavy with tension. Robert looked at me. Alex, this is your opportunity to respond. I stood up slowly, calmly. I looked at Marcus. He was leaning back in his chair, that slight smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. Thank you, Robert. And thank you, Marcus, for that very thorough presentation of your concerns. I walked to the front of the room, laptop remote in hand. Marcus is right about one thing. We need to discuss serious concerns about this project. Concerns about communication, about collaboration, and about professional integrity. I saw Marcus's expression flicker. Just for a second. Members of the board, you've all seen Marcus's email from Tuesday evening. But there's context you haven't seen. Context that I think is absolutely critical to understanding what's really happening here. I clicked on my first slide. It showed Marcus's email from 2 weeks ago offering to review my presentation. 2 weeks ago, Marcus sent me this email offering to help review my board presentation. He emphasized his experience, his desire to help me succeed. I appreciated the offer. I sent him my presentation deck. Next slide. A side-by-side comparison of my original presentation structure versus Marcus's suggestions. Marcus came back with extensive feedback. Pages of it. He said my presentation was disorganized, that it needed to be completely restructured. So I spent an entire weekend implementing every single one of his suggestions. I paused, looking around the room. What Marcus suggested I remove was the comprehensive risk assessment he just said was missing. What he suggested I cut was the detailed vendor comparison showing our cost-benefit analysis. What he told me to restructure was the timeline section that he just called unrealistic. I let that hang in the air for a moment. In other words, Marcus gave me feedback specifically designed to make my presentation worse, to make me look unprepared, to make his concerns in that email seem legitimate. Next slide. The email Marcus sent to the other manager 2 months ago. The smoking gun. But this isn't about a presentation. This is about something Marcus wrote 2 months ago. This email was sent to Greg Thompson in finance. I was accidentally copied on it. I think Marcus forgot I was on the thread. I read the email out loud, slowly and clearly. The Phoenix project is perfect. If I can make Alex look incompetent on this, that VP position opening next quarter is mine. Just need to be patient and let them dig their own grave. The silence in that room was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop. I looked at Marcus. All color had drained from his face. His mouth was opening and closing, but no sound was coming out. There's more, I continued. Next slide. A timeline of every delayed deliverable from Marcus's department, with the emails where he'd promised them by specific dates. Over the past 3 months, Marcus's department has delayed 17 critical deliverables for this project. Every single one came with an excuse, emergencies, competing priorities, resource constraints. But here's what's interesting. I clicked to the next slide showing email exchanges with other department heads. When I reached out to other departments asking if they were experiencing similar delays for Marcus's team, they said no. In fact, Marcus's team has been ahead of schedule on every other project they're supporting. Just not mine. Slide after slide, I laid it out. Each one was a piece of the puzzle. Emails where Marcus instructed his team not to collaborate with me without his explicit approval. Messages where he questioned my competence to other managers. Documentation of meetings he'd canceled last minute. Meetings where I later discovered there had been no actual emergency. And then I showed them the conversations where Marcus had discussed specific strategies to undermine my credibility with senior leadership. After the 8th slide, one of the board members, a woman named Patricia who'd been with the company for 20 years, held up her hand. "I've seen enough," she said, her voice hard. "Marcus, I think you need to leave this meeting immediately. Robert, I suggest we place him on immediate administrative leave pending a full investigation." Robert nodded, his face grim. "Marcus, please gather your things and leave. HR will be in contact with you this afternoon." Marcus tried to speak. She's taken things out of context. "I can explain, Dash. Now, Marcus." Robert's voice left no room for argument. Marcus stood on shaky legs. He looked at me, and in his eyes, I saw the moment he realized he'd destroyed himself. His own words, his own emails, his own documented plans, they'd all come back to annihilate him. He walked out of the boardroom. The door clicked shut behind him. Robert turned to me. "Alex, I apologize that you've had to deal with this. Please, show us your original presentation. The one you created before Marcus's interference." I loaded up my original deck. The one I'd spent months perfecting. The one I knew was excellent. And for the next 30 minutes, I gave the presentation of my career. The board approved Project Phoenix with a unanimous vote. They increased the budget by 20% to ensure we had adequate resources. And at the end of the meeting, Patricia approached me. "Alex, we've been planning to create a new Senior Director of Strategic Initiatives position. We'd like to offer it to you, effective immediately. Interested?" I accepted on the spot. Marcus was fired 2 weeks later. I found out through the company grapevine that the investigation had uncovered even more evidence of his sabotage, not just against me, but against 2 other colleagues he'd viewed as competition. Apparently, I wasn't his first victim, but I was the first person who documented everything thoroughly enough to prove what he was doing. The company implemented new policies about collaborative feedback and communication standards. They created an anonymous reporting system for concerns about workplace sabotage. My situation had revealed a gap in their systems, and they moved quickly to address it. As for me, that was 6 months ago. I'm now leading 3 major strategic initiatives for the company. Project Phoenix launched successfully 2 months ago and is already showing the cost savings we projected. And that VP position Marcus wanted so badly, I'm being seriously considered for it. I heard through a mutual contact that Marcus is still looking for work. When potential employers do their due diligence and reach out for references, they get the full story. Turns out that when you leave a company after being fired for systematically sabotaging colleagues, it follows you. But I want to be clear about something. I'm not telling you this story because I'm proud of taking someone down. I'm not celebrating Marcus's professional destruction. What I'm celebrating is justice. The truth coming to light. Bad behavior having real consequences. And I want to share the lessons I learned because I think they're valuable for anyone navigating corporate politics. Lesson 1, document everything. And I mean everything. Every email, every conversation, every commitment made and broken. You don't do this because you're paranoid or because you expect everyone to betray you. You do it because when someone does act in bad faith, you need proof. And proof is the difference between looking paranoid and revealing the truth. I had over 4 months of meticulous documentation. Dates, times, exact quotes, screenshots, forwarded emails. Without that documentation, Marcus's version of events would have been just as credible as mine. It would have been he said, she said. But with documentation, it became facts versus lies. Lesson 2, trust your instincts. I knew something was off about Marcus from early on. I felt it, but I dismissed those feelings because I didn't have proof and I didn't want to be unfair. Here's the truth. Your instincts are usually right. You don't need to act on them immediately, but you should pay attention to them. When someone consistently makes you feel undermined or questioned, that's information. Lesson 3. Never let someone else define your worth or capability. Marcus almost succeeded in making me doubt myself. His constant questioning, his helpful concerns, his suggestions that I was overwhelmed or inexperienced, it got into my head. I started wondering if maybe he was right. Maybe I wasn't ready for this level of responsibility. But the truth was, I was absolutely ready. My work was excellent. My presentation was strong. My project plan was solid. Marcus's opinions about my capabilities didn't change the objective quality of my work. Remember that. Don't let someone else's agenda cloud your assessment of your own abilities. Lesson 4. The best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's truth. I didn't have to exaggerate or lie or manipulate anything. I just had to show what actually happened. Marcus destroyed himself. Every email he sent, every plan he documented, every conversation where he revealed his true intentions, those were all his choices. I just held up a mirror and let people see what he'd created. There's something poetic about that. He spent months trying to make me look incompetent. And in the end, his own words proved his incompetence. Or rather, his competence at sabotage, which is maybe worse. Lesson 5. Competence is your best defense. If my project had been weak, if my presentation had been poor, if my work had been substandard, none of my evidence against Marcus would have mattered. The board would have looked at the situation and thought, well, Marcus was right. Alex wasn't ready for this. But because my work was excellent, because I had put in the time and effort to create something genuinely valuable, I had solid ground to stand on. You can't just document someone else's bad behavior. You also need to demonstrate your own good work. And lesson 6, sometimes the worst thing you can do to someone planning your downfall is to let them keep talking. Marcus sent that email to the entire executive team. He stood up in that boardroom and gave a 15-minute presentation about my inadequacies. He documented his concerns in writing. If he'd just quietly undermined me without creating such an obvious paper trail, it would have been much harder to prove what he was doing. But his arrogance, his confidence that he'd already won, made him careless. He wanted credit for my downfall, and that need for credit became the evidence that exposed him. So what's the moral of this story? It's not that all coworkers are secretly trying to destroy you. Most people you work with are decent, collaborative professionals. The workplace doesn't have to be a battlefield, but some people are toxic. Some people see every colleague as competition to be eliminated. Some people are willing to sabotage others to advance their own careers. And when you encounter someone like that, you have choices. You can ignore it and hope they go away. You can engage in your own sabotage. You can quit and find a new job. Or you could do what I did. Document everything. Do excellent work. Trust the truth. And when the moment comes, present the facts and let justice run its course. Marcus tried to humiliate me in front of the board of directors. He tried to destroy my career to advance his own. He spent months poisoning my professional reputation. But his own emails did the job for me. Every word he wrote, every plan he documented, every intention he put in writing became the evidence that exposed him. Karma isn't just real. Sometimes, karma is an email thread. If you found this story valuable, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment telling me your own workplace story. Have you dealt with a toxic coworker? How did you handle it? What would you have done differently? And remember, work with integrity. Document everything. Do excellent work. And trust that the truth has a way of coming out. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.